Well, I'm very excited to have this next guest on Robservations, episode number 400. This is one of my favorite people in the industry. I've known her for, 20 years now. We've worked together. I admire her, and she has become one of the most, I think, important, one of the most important directors working today, especially in the documentary field. I expect great things from her in the future, and she's somebody that has not rested on her laurels. KERRY DAVID, ladies and gentlemen, please give a great welcome. I can't see you guys clapping for her, but you should be clapping for her. So welcome to Robservations, KERRY. Thank you for being here.
I am so honored to be on your 400th show, and now no other introduction is ever going to compare to that, so I'm going to hang up my clogs.
Well, I mean, you've always been somebody, obviously, we worked together. We both worked on Cody Banks together. That was we could make a whole documentary about that, which we
and
won't.
We might.
and we there you go. And we did get 2 movies made in a year, which is exciting. But you go all the way back. I mean, you were Nicole Kidman's assistant. So you worked for, at the time, the Cruises. And then you sort of worked your way up. We met, we had a company, Endless Entertainment, where we worked on the Usual Suspects DVD documentary together. And then Agent Cody Banks, and then you started your own concerns. You were one of the producers on My Date with Drew.
I was.
With Brian Herzlinger's story, who's now also become a big director in town.
He
but
has.
Then you did something I didn't expect, where you've become a documentarian who has become worldwide in terms of importance. Your latest film, Breaking Their Silence, has been winning all kinds of festival awards, and it wasn't something like, you didn't just cover nursing homes or something. You covered one of I think the biggest problems facing the world today, which is the illegal wildlife trade in big animals that is destroying the legacy of the planet. These wonderful creatures that have as much right to be here as we do, maybe even more. They've been here longer. But you were out there sleeping in Africa, finding illegal animal traders in Vietnam. I mean, traveling the world making this documentary, and it's been burning up the film festivals. I mean, how many awards have you won now? Do you know?
Well, weirdly, we just won a Platinum Remy Award, which makes us eligible for the Canadian Oscars, the equivalent, yesterday. Wow. And in this time of, all the festivals were shutting down. So I thought we had like 5 coming up, but I just sort of thought, okay, well, we're not going to have those because we can't, social, what we call it, social justice. Social distancing.
But you're dealing with social justice too, so we'll get into that.
It's in my head. Well, I feel like, so we've won, I think, 17, which is ridiculous. It certainly wasn't our intent. It was our hope. It wasn't our intent. But can I break something here? Because I did not realize how timely the movie would be with what's going on with our self-quarantine. People are saying, what is a pangolin or what's a wet market? Right. So my film, Breaking Their Silence, takes you on that journey. And so you contextually understand why a pangolin was in that wet market and what we can do to prevent that happening in the future. And because it's so relevant, I went to my investors, and I said, look, I know that we're about to go out to distribution. I said, but I don't think we can sit on this. We don't know how long we'll be home for. So they've agreed to do a 2-night only sneak preview, pay-per-view on Vimeo on May the 9th and May the 14th. So anyone who hasn't seen the film, and we get requests to see it all the time, will get to see it in a 24-hour period, May the 9th, May the 14th. So details are forthcoming.
I found out about the human-animal wildlife crisis and the poaching crisis, and then I started to research it. The more I researched, the worse the information got. But I started to hear about some incredible women who were doing remarkable things. I thought, I'm a filmmaker. What I can do is tell their stories. We traveled all over Africa, and this is what they had to say.
In our culture, the men are always superior to the women. If you are women in power, you have to be strong. You have to be able to stand your ground and stand for yourself.
Initially, we were focused on habitat management and fire management, but it shifted significantly towards anti-poaching, rhino protection, because we're so overwhelmed with the anti-poaching crisis.
How many other women hold this position?
None that I know of.
There were 2 little babies and they had their horns hacked off. The staff there were tied up, beaten, assaulted, raped.
But the first time I saw a rhino carcass after it had been poached, my sisters went in the vehicle with me and
the greatest threat to this planet is the belief that someone else will save it.
We need to stand together. They said, "We are here to kill you." I pleaded with them. If they kill me, they must stop.
If you look after the rhino, you will look after the bird, you will look after the antelope. It is holistic thinking.
With our culture, we are supposed to bow. You will find that our daughters will not bow down.
There's poverty, there's corruption, and there's greed. But on the other hand, there's faith, there's hope, and there's love.
You know, now there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about women in the entertainment business. But you've been in the entertainment business, I don't want to say how long, but decades.
Thank you.
Decades
Yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
how did you begin your career? And you, as I said, I've always admired you because you've always forged your own path. At least it seemed that way to me. And I've always been impressed, especially over the last 20 years, how you've navigated your career and the incredible things that you've done. I mean, you did a documentary on women themselves and where they're at in terms of their lives. How did it all begin for you? How did you get into the entertainment business? What is your background and what drives you? Small questions.
Tiny little questions, live questions. Okay, so I left home at 17. I left home early, and I was just going to go on a 2-week foreign exchange in France. But I ended up backpacking around Europe for a year. So I didn't come back till a year later when I was 18, and I got the travel bug. So I then went to Australia, and I did exactly the same thing there. For 2 years, I was backpacking around there, and my visa ran out. So I came to America. And within 2 weeks of being here, I got into an all-girls band. So it wasn't my intention. I wasn't going to put my pegs down here. I was going to go right back to Australia. But I suddenly had this sort of incredible world open up to me. And it was in the music industry, but it was my first foray into entertainment.
Wait a minute. I got to back right up. How did you get in? Like, you come to America, you're here for a couple weeks, and suddenly, were you fronting a girl band? Were you playing bass? What? How did you get into a girl band?
It's again, a lot of my life has been super fateful. You know, I just believe in destiny. Right. So my uncle was an engineer, and a confirmed bachelor. He would build Harleys from the ground up when he was like a kid. He was like a James Dean type. So here's his like 18-year-old niece coming to sleeping on his couch, seemingly never going to leave. And he said to his secretary, "Can you get her out of my hair? She's like in my house all day long." And his secretary had a daughter, who married Brian Setzer, Christine Setzer. So Christine was in a band.
Of course she did.
And so of course she did, right? And she was in a band. And she said, "Well, you can come, you know, we're writing songs." Now, I'm 18, I'm from England, I'm from a village this big. Somebody saying, "Come over here, we're writing songs," is like, oh, you know, all the arias at once. And I never had sang ever for an audience, but I would sing in the shower. I'd sing all the time. Anyway, we went over there, and they were so engrossing and encouraging, and said, you know, so they let me write the song with them. And at the end of it, I was singing it because they're all like backups. And then they all stopped and looked and said, "You can sing." And I'm like, well, I mean, I can sing. I can't sing in front of people. I can sing in front of you guys. They said, "No, you have to come try out." I was so terrified. Like that first Agent Cody Banks meeting. I was just terrified having to go in there on my own. And I can't even tell you what happened. A whole bunch of people tried out, and they picked me. And so for the next 4 years, I was the lead singer in an all-girl band. It was a great time.
Can you tell us the name of the band?
Do you know why I'm not going to tell you the name? Because I know you, and you'll go find a clip and you'll play it.
Yes, I am.
It was the 80s. I had hair out to here. We were called the Rebel Pebbles. And you know who loved us was Poor Man on K-Rock. And I bumped into him at the Newport Beach Film Festival, and he came over and he kissed, he remembered me. It was like, God, that was the 80s. So, and he hasn't changed at all. He looked great. So yeah, so from the band, after 4 years, I got a little tired of it. You know, it was almost like the more successful we were, the more we were infighting. It was such a shame, and I think there's a lot of reasons why girl bands don't make it. There's a lot of cattiness. I'm still friendly with them all, thank God. But at the time, I just needed to get out. And then, of course, I needed a job. So it seems like I had this calculated career, but I literally just went for a temp job at Paramount Pictures in screen credit and title administration, of all things.
But an important job, as we well know, it's an important job.
It's a very important job. And it's, listen, learning every department from the ground up will never go awry. It'll always serve you, right? Yeah. Go spend time in every department, because if you want to produce and direct, you need to know what everyone's doing. So I was there 2 weeks or maybe 2 months. I can't remember now, but not long. And I met this guy who was a business affairs attorney, and he needed an assistant. And he said, yeah, leave there, come work with me. He was in the admin building at Paramount Pictures. And I thought, I'm not prepared. I don't know anything about this world. But it ended up being a great job. And I learned everything about how studios negotiate with talent, because I'm seeing all the deals, all the above the line deals, right? And I didn't even know I wanted to be a producer at that point. So from then I bumped into a guy who was really good friends with Tom Cruise's CEO. And he said to me, you should meet her because she's going to love you. And I thought to myself, he clearly doesn't realize that I have a lock me up crush on Tom Cruise, clearly. So I need to keep that on the down low. But if you do any due diligence on me with a friend who's 2 degrees from me, they'd be like, don't let her near Tom Cruise. It'll be ugly. And she said to him, okay, have her come over on a Sunday and we'll hang out. I'll get to know her. So she lived in the Palisades, and her name was Andrea. And I went over there and I walked into her kitchen, and it was the era of Polaroids. And in her kitchen is like her on vacation with Tom Cruise. And they're like, Tom Cruise canoeing, Tom Cruise mountain climbing. I'm thinking, keep it together, Kerry, keep it together. This is like, just don't blow this. Anyway, we had a great day. We spent the day together, and she offered me a job. But now I'm at Paramount Pictures, right? And you know what that environment like. It's just kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
It's got to take a lot to pull you out of that, right? So she offered me the job, and I turned it down. I thought, hey, that's going to be my life story. I turned down a job from Tom Cruise. She couldn't believe it, I think. But I didn't turn it down for any sort of grandiose reasons. I had a better job where I was, and I thought I would be happier at that job. So they actually offered me another job, which I almost took. But then I thought, I'll be bored in like 6 months on that job. Then we're both going to be looking for work. And then she called me from the set of the others in Spain and said, listen, Nicole needs an executive assistant. Unless you want to be Nicole, it doesn't get any better over here. Do you want to work with us or not? And I said, yeah, that's a job I'll take.
What a great movie what a great movie to get the call on. I love that film.
A
Menabars movie.
Yeah. And so my first, as you know, and I think we bonded on this, so certainly you picked my brain more than anyone I know, was I got to work on Eyes Wide Shut. And it was before it was, ramping up. And here I am, a Brit. I go to England on an American salary, and I spend the next, what was supposed to be 3.5 months and turned into like a year and 2 months, working with Stanley Kubrick, Tom Cruise, and Nicole Kidman. So that was my practical side of filmmaking. So I had the business side, working in business affairs, and then I got the practice. That's my film school in many ways. So
now I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. You can't just say that you worked on a movie, the last movie of my favorite director of all time, with two of. I mean, what's very interesting is both Nicole Kidman, who I think is one of our finest actresses working today.
Definitely.
I thought she was terrific all the way back to Dead Calm. I don't think I had seen.
Yes.
She's been incredible, and Stanley Kubrick and Tom Cruise. So what was it like? Was for you? I mean, not to derail the whole thing, but to work on that set, watching how I'm specifically interested. Kubrick did not work with a huge crew. And that was one of the reasons that people, he had that great deal with Warner Brothers, because he might have shot for a long time, but he wasn't spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And what was it like to be there? And were there any insights? Did you glean anything that lessons you've learned that you've carried with you from that experience?
It was my first movie set to be on. So I think I probably made every mistake possible being on it, including going to the bathroom with my mic hot. So if you think about that, it was like wonderland for me. I learned every single thing I could. I even learned how just that sort of Machiavellian way that a director rules the set. Not every director, but in his specific case, he was really smart, right? He played, it's going to sound so bad. He played people, but it was like a massive game of chess, that set for him. Because I watched him, because I was able to watch him.
And he was a chess master in real life.
Was he really? Okay, well, I didn't know that, but that makes so much sense.
He hustled chess in the parks in New York City when he was in his teens.
And of course you would know that. You're an encyclopedia. Seriously. You are a national treasure.
Well, thank you.
Rob, it goes back so far. I do remember there's a lot of moments where I had sort of this out-of-body experience. And one was, it's not a secret anymore. Like we were writing pages the night before we were shooting the next day. It was a little bit chaotic. And I remember being in Tom's trailer, and I was just sitting there. And it was Tom and Nick running lines with Stanley and me. And I'm going, what is wrong with this picture? I mean, it's like Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, who were remember they were legends. They were at the top of their game.
Oh, yeah.
And Stanley Kubrick and this little pleb from England, from a village not an hour away from where we were at Pinewood. And it was just really surreal. And I think in that moment, my Uncle Terry, who passed away, sadly, he always said to me, darling, you can have anything you set your mind to. I think in that moment, the correlation between him always having had said that to me and me being in this situation where I'm with my idol, I didn't know much of Nick's work prior to that, but, and with Nicole and then with Stanley Kubrick. So I thought, this is like, I could die now and I'd be happy. Like this would all have been worth it.
Right.
So there were a few moments like that. Just, it was a different time in films, and I know you'll appreciate this. There was so much more secrecy that shrouded the set, especially that set, but also celebrities and stars. They were different then. They're so accessible now, and there is sort of something sweet about the fact that they are accessible now, but there was something more mysterious and alluring and special in that era. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And also that film in particular. I mean, everybody wanted to know what was going on. It was incredibly secret. And it's interesting because Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were at the time, they were the couple. They were Hollywood royalty to end all royalty. I mean, having met on the set of Days of Thunder and working with Simpson Bruckheimer, and then the whole 90s was the decade of Cruise and Kidman, and as far as Hollywood was concerned. And this was sort of the culmination. I mean, what more could a Hollywood power couple want than to work with one of the greatest film directors of all time on what later became his final movie, unfortunately. But I mean, I can't even imagine, because as far as Hollywood goes, you couldn't have been in a place that really was more Hollywood, even though the set might not have been as Hollywood as we think of today, because it was more of an intimate working environment. But still, you found yourself at this place. That time will never come around again.
No, it won't. It was really interesting. Again, I came from knowing nothing about how the studio system worked. And while we were there, we were supposed to be there for 3 months. And obviously it kept getting extended and extended. And I think it was, which one was Pierce Brosnan's in? Die Another Tomorrow, something about tomorrow. The James Bond movie. Tomorrow Never Dies. Was that, you were making them concurrently.
Right.
So they came and they went, and they were notoriously like a really big set, so they came away, and Pierce Brosnan was one of my favorite celebrities that came to meet with them. He could not have been nicer and kinder. And just, some people walk right past the assistants, you're peons to them. He would always, he knew your name when he showed up. He took time out, chatted with you, and then's like, oh yeah, is Tom around? Just the nicest guy. So, and then, oh my gosh, this is a great moment. Oh my God, blanking on his name. The director, Sydney.
Of Tomorrow Never Dies?
No, he came to be...
Sidney Pollack. Sidney Pollack, who was in Eyes Wide Shut.
Thank you.
Who was great in Eyes Wide Shut.
And was so great. We had so much downtime on that. He taught us how to cook in Italian. I still use his recipes now. And he was genius, like so much fun to be around. He was like... you'd have like dark moments in the film where you just thought this film's never going to get made, and then you'd have like Sydney would come in and just like the set would be great for weeks, and so it was sort of a lot of ups and downs, which, as in a movie, that's a movie, a lot of ups and a lot of downs.
So it
was a great experience.
So I met you soon after that experience, and we met at the Four Seasons, at the bar at the Four Seasons, which is, it's always fun to have meetings at the Four Seasons because that's the hotel everyone goes to when they're here for the Oscars. And we met and sort of started our own little company, and the project that we had to sort of push forward after you and I did the Usual Suspects documentary, which was the first DVD documentary I sort of produced because I had a day job with another company, and they were like, they weren't interested. We were working on Lord of the Rings, so why would we do the Usual Suspects? I'm like, okay. So my boss made me start our own video company. I mean, it later became Ludovico, but it started as Endless Entertainment. So you and I, that was the first thing we worked on together. And Dave Parker, editing, who's now, we just finished our Hills Run Red Blu-ray, which is coming out in June. But then
that's exciting.
Agent Cody Banks was the first project that we had acquired from a limo driver. But you were really instrumental in getting Zach and Ashley, obviously, who I had already known, but getting them to come in and rewrite the original script. And then it was sort of laying fallow. The project was laying fallow, but because of your efforts, I guess talk a little bit about Zach and Ashley getting involved, and then what you did personally on your own to sort of, when the project it was kind of lying dormant, you sort of supercharged it. And if you could talk a little bit about that'd be
sure.
great.
Yeah. Well, I want to just also say, at that time when we were doing the Usual Suspects DVD, you were incredible teacher on that. I learned so much from you, and you were the producer. So I literally was just sucking up everything that all of the experience that you were so great about giving me that autonomy, because I had been an assistant to Nicole. I had run a set, so you were amazing at giving me autonomy, which I hope that I have also implemented now as a producer on set. I try to give autonomy too. You didn't micromanage, but I learned so much from you during that situation. With regard to Agent Cody Banks.
Well, wait, you know what? You just reminded me, because we had to set up out of state shoots.
Yeah.
Like we had Stephen Baldwin, we had to go to Nevada. And then it was was crazy. And then Gabriel Byrne we shot at the Sunset Marquee, and I mean it's funny because I think, we were doing that. Okay,
it was very run and gun. If you think about it, like that experience, how I was the makeup person, I was whatever, right? I learned that in order to get a project done, you have to wear a lot of hats if you're really passionate about it, which we were so passionate. We talk about a tiny crew,
right?
And it was a really all-star cast. Remember, like we were excited by getting interviews with every one of those casts. But it was that experience is how I make films today. Like from My Date with Drew to the film that I'm on right now, you don't always have the budget that you want. Most of the time, you never get the budget that you want. So you have to wear many hats. And so you hire people who understand that and love film and want to do whatever it takes. And that's what I have with the crew I have now. And it's how I make films. But you can't really do that. You can't do it with a studio film, but you can do it when you do independent films. And I consider myself an independent filmmaker. Yeah. So what was the question? Completely forgotten.
Well, no, that was so Cody Banks, we acquired the script. We all optioned it together, and it kind of, the script the idea was really good, but the script it was a first time writer. And then we're able, I had known Zach and Ashley, and then I think it was your idea to bring them in, if I remember.
So I met Zach and Ashley through you, and I believe maybe at the Four Seasons also, maybe another time, but I just remember and I just really enjoyed them, and they were so like you, the three of you. And I haven't seen Ashley in a while, but I have a project with Zach right now, and I can tell you he hasn't lost his exuberance for film, and it's so...
I'm working with Ashley on a project right now.
Oh, I see. Don't you love the family? Like when you meet people you want to work with, it's just continual, right?
It's a Netflix series.
Oh, wait, is that a Marvel series? I think I read something.
I can't say what it is because it hasn't been officially announced. But
he might have just tweeted something about it, right?
Well, he just got on Mist. He's now going to be creating the TV series Mist. And it's funny because this other show, this Netflix show, that I'm just doing a small amount of work on it, but it's something he's showrunner. He basically created it. And I let's just say it's not live action and it's not reality. I'll say that.
Ooh, teaser.
And it's something that it has a 3-season commitment, and we wrapped up the first season's done. So yeah, so it's
That's awesome.
yeah. So that's good.
Well, I love that you're still working. That's, I feel the same way. There's like two handfuls of people I feel that way about in our industry. So Zach and Ashley, I loved when we met them. So I met them through you. And then when it came down to Cody Banks, I had worked with Jeff Jurgensen, who was the writer, for nearly a year, because I felt like it was his story and we should give him that shot.
Yeah.
And, he was really earnest and he really tried, but he didn't have the experience. And so I said, well, look, this is as good as it's going to be with him. I just knew we weren't going to get any further. And so I started shopping it. And I shopped it to every single person I could think of, or that I knew, every production company, every studio. And it was about, I think, 6, 7, 8 months. It was a long time. And I sat down, I thought, okay, what am I not getting? Like, what is, it's Junior James Bond. It's never been done. Like,
Right.
Why is that not sold on a tagline? And then I thought, okay, what else did it have going for it? It had soundtrack and it had merchandising potential. And then I thought, okay, well, who's in the realm of soundtrack and merchandising? And then I had found, and that's when I learned that Madonna had just started her Maverick. So I looked up who, because back in the day, you have to look it up.
Right.
I looked up who the president was, and it was Mark Morgan. And so I literally did the girl thing. I got all my girls, calling around saying, does anybody know Mark Morgan? And one of my friends said, I know his wife really well. We're in Mommy and Me together. That was the connection to Mark. So I said, I need his email. So I emailed him and oh no, I called him. I called him back in the day. And got on the phone with him, and he said, well, it sounds really interesting, but I'm leaving on vacation tomorrow. No, I don't think anyone knows this story, by the way. So I said, okay. He goes, if you can get it messengered over to me, I'll take it on vacation with me. And I said, how long are you gone for? And he goes, it's just a week. So I think I took it over myself. I'm sure I
Right.
gave it over.
As we would do. And you
Back
pretend you're a messenger. Hi, this is a delivery from.
There's a great indie movie in that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. Anyway, he calls me 3 days later from vacation. Now, a producer of any huge company, if they're calling you like on their vacation, like you have hooked them.
Yeah, you're in.
And so he said, you're in. And he said, what would it take for me? What would I have to do for you to stop shopping this project? And I said, thinking to myself, I don't know, keep breathing. I have literally nowhere else to go. But I didn't tell him that. I said, if you send me a deal memo and if you fax that to me, because faxes back then, if you fax that to me and it's on my desk tomorrow, I'll stop shopping it.
You
Rob,
said that.
And who I was dating at the time was Clark Peterson. And he
Right.
was so proud of me because he was a producer. He produced Monster and a million other ones. And he looked at me and he goes, you're definitely a producer. He said, and I was terrified.
I would say, those are some brass balls you had there.
But listen, I had nowhere else to go. I had nothing to lose, right?
Right.
Anyway, I had a deal memo. He faxed it to me the next day. And then, so that's how it went started. And he introduced you and me to David, somebody or other at,
David Glasser.
That's it. David Glasser at the pre-Weinstein company.
Yeah. Splendid Pictures. Splendid.
That's it.
Yeah.
So he called David, and then he set up the meeting for you and me to go down to the AFM. So it wasn't actually until MGM got hooked on it that then they said that at that point, and we've gathered like 6 other producers, and the MGM just said, each set of producers, bring in your writing team. And so I called you up and said, I think, I want to work with Zach and Ashley. And I believe they worked on spec because I know they looked at 3 separate teams and Zach and Ashley won out. So it wasn't easy for any of us. It wasn't easy for them. It wasn't easy for us. And they wrote such a kick-ass script. If only that had been the film that they had made.
Well, just
imagine.
As an aside, I think we should say that they basically wrote a script. What was the thing that happened with Cody Banks is, among other things, but from a creative standpoint, that movie was written for basically 16 to 24-year-olds. And the idea was Ferris Bueller meets James Bond. Essentially is what it was, and the script was kick-ass, and it was obviously patterned off the Bond franchise, and it was spectacular, and it had scope. And I always equated it to something like, if it had gotten made, it would have been successful like Back to the Future was successful. I mean, it would have been a huge, timeless, classic film. And then
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, at that point, Alex Gardner was the president of MGM, and he got that, Rob. He understood that was the script that we had, and that was the script that should be made.
Yeah.
But he, as these studio heads go, he left shortly after we had that deal, and so he was no longer shepherding it.
Yeah, we should say the script was purchased. I mean, MGM purchased the rights and bought the script, and then he left, and then MGM decided to make it a film for tweens, 8 to 12-year-olds.
Yeah. So it became a different film. But, you know, we also knew how difficult it was to get a potential movie franchise, right? Which was what we always saw it as.
Yeah.
And at some point, you know, what can you do? You got to go along with, and it was also, we were so green. We didn't know anything. You know, it was our first huge studio movie on our own. And we did the best. I look back and I know we did the best we could. We you know, we put our,
I mean, not only did we do the best we could, we sold the script in February, and it was in production in May.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, that was insanity. And not only that, not only was the movie made, but they made a sequel a year later, which we also were producers on. But I think, you know, on one hand, you can say the movies got made, and that's the goal. And any producer worth their salt will tell you getting anything made in the studio system's insanity anyway. And for being as green as we were, it got made. So it was an epic win. But it also showed us, at least I think it showed you and I, that, you know, just getting something made sometimes isn't enough. I mean, it was at the time. But if we had retained creative control and were able to push what the original impulse of the project was, it might have been a lot more successful. I mean, we were
hands down, it would have. It really would have. You know, because at the same time, Zach and Ashley were getting. I mean, they were the least green of all of us, right? Because they had successful. They had Sarah Connor Chronicles. They had a lot of success in TV. I think if we could have just retained that team of the four of us, we would still have a franchise today. It would have been the junior equivalent of James Bond, which is what we always wanted it to be, right?
Right,
Just
and
under the.
Well, no, we would have made 20 of those movies.
Yeah, I think so. But you know, you make a good point, which is, and because I say this all the time, some people complain. I love to mentor, and I get a lot of people saying, well, they don't want to pay me up front for this. And you just think, well, that's the industry that we're in right now. If you care enough, like, you need to make it as best as you can. And if you found a producer who believes in you and you have a shot at making a film, then your job is to do absolutely everything you can. You write it into your deal that if the deal goes, you get recompense for the work you've done, but you got to do the work up front. Like, we're all in the same boat,
right?
You know, but again, I have more compassion because I realize they're just us back then when we didn't know any better, and everyone is just doing the best they can.
Yes.
But it is where I think you and I learned how to be tenacious in the face of massive adversity, because
there was
massive adversity, but you know, what a gift and a blessing to say this is what you do for a living, right? We get to be creative, we get to make stories, we get to move people, you know, and give hope and inspiration. So it's all part of the path, right? I wouldn't change a thing looking back, because everything brought me here.
Yeah.
And I truly feel that way. Well,
and what's interesting too is that, yes, would I have liked to have been an established director or producer and been able to focus on just doing that? But one of the things you and I have is that we're still here. I know a lot of people that, you know, they give up, and for me, it's about the process, and it's about the actual work, the creation itself. And I don't care what I'm working on, doing a little small sliver of work for Ashley, or whether I just did DVD special features. We created 390 minutes, which is 6.5 hours, for an 81-minute movie. Because why not? You know, it's the last word. I mean, Scream Factory's putting it out. And I mean, here, you know, we jumped from making Cody Banks, and then we jumped back. You know, you pivoted, but now you're a credited producer on studio movies, 2 studio movies, and then you went forward and made I think one of the more crazy and delightful documentaries, reality. I mean, you made My Date with Drew, and how did that come about?
You know what's beautiful about My Date with Drew is, outside of breaking their silence, to date, it has been my most wonderful film memory of making it. My friends that I'm still friends with now, that were part of that team. It came about because my business partner, John Gunn, who was a director, and he's also a writer and a producer, and myself, had been in business for maybe a year, and we were working on something. And he had 2 friends from Ithaca College, where they all 3 went to film school, and that was Brett Wynn, Brian Herzlinger. And Brian was as broke can be. And Brett and Brian were out at Hamburger Hamlet, and Brian had just won $1,100 on a game show, where the winning answer was Drew Barrymore. And, it's called My Date with Drew. And Brian was sitting there going, I could take this $1,100, which was all he had to his name, and I could pay my rent. He's like, or I could make a movie. And so the two of them said, well, I think it was actually Brett that said to Brian, well, what can we do like a movie about you? Like, what would it be? Like, and he had this authentic crush on Drew Barrymore, which he'd had since he was 6 years old when he joined her fan club. And he said, what about if I tried to get a date with Drew Barrymore? Which, preposterous. There's no way you're getting this kid from New Jersey, broke, to Drew Barrymore, who was doing really well at the time. And so they called John, and I happened to be with him, and then said, why don't we make a documentary trying to get Brian a date with Drew Barrymore just by the people that we know, like 6 degrees of separation. Now, you got to understand, the internet had just started. So
right.
Now you could email or search. You could do none of that, right? And so John said, I think it's kind of dumb. And of course, coming from this mad crush on Tom Cruise, I looked at him and I said, it's genius. I said, there's not one person alive today that can't understand what it would be to try to meet your crush. So that's how it started. And what was really brilliant about it was we couldn't afford a camera. All 4 of us together couldn't afford a camera back then. So we went to Circuit City and we rented a consumer camera because they had just come out, and it had a 30-day return policy. And I looked at them and I said, right, there's our schedule. We got 30 days to return this camera without paying for it. And we still get accused of shutting Circuit City down. They did. It was because of us. They put in a 20% restocking fee. And we used Brian's $1,100, and then it became this like 6 degrees of separation trying to get to Drew. I remember we got on a radio show in LA, and we're so excited because we had just put up this website, and it was so successful. So many people went to that website that it crashed, so they couldn't get any information off of it. And I mean, the whole movie was made that way, right? 6 degrees of separation. So there's actually another great story behind the scenes about that. I'll tell you it off camera another time, but about distribution. So yeah, and and it's still one of our favorite. And we won every single film festival that we entered.
Yeah.
We made it for $1,100. We sold it for $650,000, and it went on to make $4 million.
Well, I would say that's producing, Kerry. That's producing.
And it had a worldwide theatrical release, which, and here's genius, right, to tell you how green we were. So we shot the whole thing. We didn't know this because it got blown up to 35 millimeter. Thank you, 35 millimeter. And that was when we found out that we had shot the whole film on autofocus. And so when you had somebody in frame, and in fact, Allison Burnett, who's a screenwriter, we were filming him in his house, and he's sitting back in his chair. And so we've got this crystal clear front arm of the chair he's sitting on, and he's a blur in the back because it was autofocus. So that we went through a whole host of like having to fix those problems. But again, the industry comes in, tries to tear you apart. I mean, Bravo wanted to buy it. We were rep by CAA, and Bravo wanted to buy it for $250,000, and we turned it down because they wanted to chop it up into 12 episodes. And we said, no, it's a feature film. We made it to be a feature film. And then CAA went ballistic on us, like, you made it for $1,100, $250,000. What are you holding out for? And they made it all about the money. They never got the fact that we're like, no, we just want, this is a movie, and we're winning every film festival. People love this film. And so we held on, and then DEJ and Blockbuster bought it for $650,000, and we got the worldwide theatrical. So.
And who looks smarter in the end, CAA or you guys?
We actually fired CAA, and it was such a horrifyingly terrifying thing to do as young filmmakers, thinking we'd never work. They said you'd never work in this film industry again. So, it's not worth the paper it's written on.
Well, now let me ask you for that, just from a production standpoint, from the time you had, say, that first meeting to the time you actually finished the film and submitted it to festivals, how much time transpired? Was it a year, less?
Well, it was more than a year, but only because I hate to give it away because some people don't know about it, but we didn't make it in the 30 days. And this all plays into the film. Right. We didn't get to Drew in 30 days. We got really close, and we got like within 1 degree.
But that's okay. I mean,
It was, so it was for that 30 days. And we also play into the film. We moved from motion camera to still camera, where we're handing the camera back to Circuit City, and then it's all in stills, right? Because we don't have a camera. And then we got word, like shortly after we got word that Drew had just found out about it. So we ramped back up again. But again, this is all in the film, so I hate to ruin it. If people are interested, you could sort of see how it plays out. I still have the phone that Brian's sobbing on because we find out Drew has been trying to get a hold of us, but people kept sending her videotapes and she didn't have a video player. She was staying at a friend's house in New York. So that movie behind the scenes, that's a movie and a half to make. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's always more interesting behind the scenes, right?
Well, it's amazing. You know, and I think it was sometime after that, even though I had to leave halfway through, you got me a job working with John on like Dandelion Dust. And I was your assistant editor for a while, and then I had to go to Bulgaria and produce The Hills Run Red.
Hills Run Red.
But I still get it. Yeah. You still get me a screen credit on that. Now that film is a terrific movie with some amazing performances. Talk a little bit about that, because I guess it would be considered a faith-based movie because it's based on.
Well, it is. But you know what's really? Oh my God, this is a great conversation. Okay, so you can cut this down, right? But okay, so. It was a faith-based movie. It was Karen Kingsbury. It was the first novel that she had written that was going to be turned into a film, and she was the #1 Christian screenwriter. So some friends of ours, brothers, Kevin and Bobby Downs, bought the book to John and me and said, you know, John, would you direct and Kerry produce with us? And we both read the book, and we felt like it was just not a project that we wanted to do. It was just too on the nose. And I think I can't remember how it came back to us, but maybe like a month or so later, they came back and said, look, please, we'll let you do it however you want to do it. So I said to John, well, let's read it. And then let's like spitball how we could make this really an interesting indie film. And that's what we did. And so John and I decided to write the treatment for it ourselves. So rewrite what Karen had done so that it would be more film-ic. And we were going backwards and forwards. It was my turn to have the treatment. So I'm writing the treatment and I get a phone call, and it was Steve Revell, who's a friend of mine, an Oscar-nominated screenwriter. He wrote Ali, he wrote Nixon. He's like written a whole bunch of he's a brilliant man. And he's like, oh, what are you working on? And I said, oh, and I roughly told him what it was about. I'd known Steve for maybe 7 or 8 years. What I didn't know is that he had adopted children and he had a 4-year-old son, and this whole story that we were writing about was his life story.
Wow.
And he said, do you have a screenwriter for that? And I was like that producer moment where you're like, Oscar nominated screenwriter for this tiny budget, you know, that Fox was releasing. I said, Steve, this is not your $1 million payday. Like, this is a truly independent film. I said, we're releasing through Fox, but it's a small budget, and I need you to know that before you take it on. He goes, yeah, send it over. And he called me back and then told me that was his life story. And I'd known him for years. I had no idea he had adopted children in the Philippines. He had a 4-year-old son. He understood this tug of war between two mothers. And because we had Steve, I brought him on board. I made a deal with him, put him on board. I sent it over to Barry Pepper because I knew his manager really well. And she loved it for him, the lead role. Barry loved it. But back then, Barry wasn't a name that we could bank the finances on that we needed to.
Right.
So we got a list from the studios who would work. And what was really great was when I put it out to Mira Sorvino, she was more interested that we had Barry Pepper attached, who she would play across from, and that Steve Revell had written it. So, you know, this is producing, right? You put the pieces together to make the best project. This is producing, and that's how we got that film made. And their work together, again, we won every festival that we entered. We won something like 35 festivals. And we premiered at the Deauville Film Festival in France, which was amazing experience. And their work together was truly phenomenal. I really did love that film. Yeah, it was a difficult film to make.
I did too.
I really loved it.
I mean, I hated leaving. It was a bummer. I know that it was. I'm like, I have to go. You know, because it
happens. Yeah,
we had a year and a half that we were trying to get this movie. It had been greenlit at Warner Brothers, and for a year we were waiting. And then they literally called up in, I think it was April of 2008. You know, and they just said, you have to leave. They told Dave Parker, you have to leave in like 4 days. And then I had to leave later, and I'm just like, wait, what? I'm in the middle of working with John, and we were working in the, you know, in Burbank, and we were meeting every night or every day working on the movie. And it was what was interesting to me was when I first started on that movie, you guys had already shot it, and it was all you had to do was look at any of the footage, and I'm like, this movie, it was beautifully directed, beautifully performed, it looked great. And I was like, wow, this is a really interesting a film. And I felt honored to work on it for the short time, only a couple months, but you guys really knocked it out of the park. Well, then after that, you did a lot of different things. How did you come to direct? Did you co-direct or direct your first documentary?
So I produced my first documentary because my date with Drew, although it plays like a feature, was a documentary.
Right.
Then I ended up co-directing Seeking Happily Ever After because the director, she was stumbling and struggling. It was not coming together. So I had to do that. I have a consulting company for people to call up, and I love it. I really love fixing problems. And I got this email from an attorney saying, we've had to fire 2 production companies. We're trying to make a documentary on Bill Coors, the brewer, and we want to consult with you. So I just remember thinking, oh, they fired 2 production companies. I'm going to have to tell them they're the problem. And
uh-oh.
So we got on a call, and there was supposedly going to be the biographer was going to join us, and she was late to the call. So I ended up talking to this female attorney, and just, as you do, wasting time. And I said, oh, where are you based? And she's like, oh, I'm in Wyoming. And I said, oh, I'm a massive horse rider. Do you love riding? So we were talking about horses. Unknowingly, the biographer had gotten on the call and was listening and was a huge horse aficionado. And so the 3 of us started talking horses, right? And then I said, well, ladies, you're on the clock. This is your time. So if you want to talk about the film, let's talk about it. So they told me all the problems. It wasn't as cut and dried as I thought. And I said, look, here's what I would do with it. No, first of all, I said, tell me, who is this man and why are you making a film about him? Because I'm British. I didn't know about the Coors family. And they told me this story. And when she said he was at school with Einstein, I said, okay, you got me at Einstein. I mean, and they told me this story, and it was a heartbreaking story about a man that had come, he just talk about overcoming insurmountable emotional issues in the family. And so I sat back and I said, look, here's what I would do with it. And I just broke the entire story down, told them that I would do it. Well, they were emailing each other. I had no idea, right? Because we were on the phone. And at the end of it, they said, well, will you direct it? And as I do, I just said yes, thinking I'll work it out later.
Right.
And
that's producing.
And I thought, I'm just going to do what I said I would do. And I've sat next to so many directors in my life in the edit bay where I love to be. I know I can work this out. And that's how I got that job. I just said yes. I knew I would work it out later. And it was I didn't even realize how amazing directing is. Never occurred to me that I didn't want to be a director. It was not my track. I'm a natural producer. And I loved the experience so much. But I ended up having to be producer, director, and writer on that project.
Sure.
Well, what was great about that is I've never had that before because it's always been other people's money, other people's, and so you're always answering to somebody, right? This was all, I could do everything. I could wear the hats. I could make it exactly as I wanted it to be. I had final cut on it. I did something really extreme with it, which was to bring in this young audience through podcasting because Bill wanted it to reach that audience. And because he had this 100-year life, I couldn't think of any other way to sort of keep the attention of kids that age other than if they could see themselves on screen. So I wove that into it. And then when I sent off that rough cut, I thought, well, that was great because I'm about to get fired. At least I had that experience. And I got the phone call. It was Bill and his biographer, and they were crying. And I mean, it felt like an hour, but maybe it was a full 5 minutes before they said anything. And then I just said, are these happy tears? And Bill just said, thank you. He said, Kerry, thank you. And then we worked together, honing it a little bit more. And I would tell you this, because even though he was 100 when I met him and he's 102 when he passed, he had a really strong will and he wanted what he wanted. So we got to the place in the film where neither one of us was willing to back down anymore. And I said, Bill, I think we're there. Because I'm not going to give and you're not going to give. This is the film we're going to put out. He was really proud of the film and it was his legacy. So that was amazing. And my friend, not that you asked me, but my friend Keith said to me, I showed him the film and he said, this is brilliant. It really spoke to him and his life. And he said, whatever your passion project is, I want to find the money and fund it. And I'd already started writing the treatment for Breaking Their Silence. So he funded it and I had that funding within 2 weeks.
Okay. Now,
it's fate.
This is amazing. Now, I saw Breaking Their Silence at the Newport Beach Film Festival.
You did.
I came down and saw it there.
You did. It was so great for coming.
But hearing a little bit about it, I'm like, well, this is a change of pace. So I know you've been asked this a million times over the last year, but my audience hasn't heard the story. So tell people, set up, what is Breaking Their Silence and how did you come to get involved in it? Obviously, it was something you were passionate about on your own already, but what was the genesis of this project? And it wasn't exactly, I mean, you went from working with Stanley Kubrick to getting Cody Banks made, like Dandelion Justice, but this was way different than anything you'd done before.
It was. And how it came to be was I'd been invited to a fundraiser downtown LA, and it was Save the Elephants. And it was shown through the view of shot by a drone. So the imagery was gorgeous as it was traumatic, what they were showing. And as an animal advocate, I hadn't realized how dire the poaching situation was around the world. I don't know if it was plausible deniability, about it, but I consider myself an advocate. I was really traumatized, and I came home, I couldn't sleep. And that's when I said, there comes a point in your life, if you care enough, you can't pretend you didn't see something. You have to act. And that was a pivotal moment for me. And I thought, okay, I'm not a wildlife specialist. What can I bring to this conversation? How can I help? What can I do? I thought I can make a film. I didn't know anything about poaching, right? So it's a great place to come from. I could make a film and learn about it and bring my audience with me. We could learn about it together. That was the genesis of it. But there have been so many films on poaching, documentaries. And obviously Nat Geo does it better than anybody. So I wasn't going to make that film. And I was sitting there at a film premiere of a documentary, which I think it was The Ivory Game. I can't remember. But all the credits that were rolling was just man, male. They're all guys. And I thought, that's my in. This has not been told through the female lens. So that was that was putting it all together. I can make a film. I can tell it through the female lens. That makes it worth doing. And I will just go to Africa. I'll go to Asia. I will learn about this. And I won't come back and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what they're doing. I will let the people on the ground, on the front lines, tell us what's going on. Didn't want to get in their way. And I mean, that's obviously in a nutshell. So I did a lot of research, reaching out to people in the space and saying, look, I want to meet some women. It's such an unsafe world. I wasn't sure that even if the women who had said they would be interested in going on camera, by the time I got there to Africa, would have changed their mind, because it is so dangerous. I mean, these are really, really dangerous people that run poaching rings. It's mafia. It's crime syndicates.
Right.
And it seems, I'm looking back, it seems like it was a lot easier. Whenever I would falter, I would just say these words: trust the process. And it was just like the most relaxing thing I could do. And I'm like, it always worked out the next day. Like whatever that insurmountable problem was like, just trust the process. You're doing the right thing, one foot in front of the other. Don't lose sight of the goal. And that's kind of how I made the film.
Well, I didn't know what to expect when I saw the movie, but I was really blown away by what you had done and what you'd accomplished, and the women that you interviewed, the courage that was on display. And while I've always believed that one of the great crimes that one day will be revealed to humanity is how we have treated the other creatures that we coexist with on this planet. And that these animals who do have as much right to be here as we do, this kind of poaching trade, and it's all, you're dealing with the big animals too, and these majestic creatures that should be protected. I mean, they really, and watching this, it really illuminates the story more from I think more of a pragmatic perspective, if you could call it an everyday perspective. I mean, you're dealing with these people like you. They've taken up this cause, and they all came from different. You talk to women who are educators. You talk to women that are on the front lines with guns. I mean, there's all kinds of different courage that the women that you deal with explore and demonstrate in this film. And then you also talked about the trade, and you went to Vietnam, and there were people that were taking their own life and limb into their own hands, even talking to you. And
yeah, because Vietnam's a communist country, and so the women that, in fact, I had planned to go to China, and the two women that I was going to interview both backed out because they backed out because they were scared what the government would do. And that was, I pivoted to Vietnam because literally, I think days after them backing out, China actually enforced the laws against poaching and bringing wildlife products across the borders. So the entire industry moved to Vietnam. So again, it's kind of fateful. And they do risk being put in jail for it. I'd love to share this with your audience because there's lots of different factions who believe trophy hunting is a great thing and it doesn't really harm anything, but they never think further than just, I'm going to pay $39,000 and I'm going to bring down a big tusker. Elephants are really sentient beings. They communicate with each other. It's now considered with telepathy. And so when you bring down a 45-year-old big tusker, what goes with that 45-year-old is all the experience and the encyclopedic knowledge that he would or she would otherwise pass on to the herd, which keeps them safe and tells them where they should migrate, what patterns, what's dangerous, what's not, where's the water, gone with one gunshot. I think it's part of what I came away from Breaking Their Silence with wanting to impart was that we seem to, as human beings, stop at the easiest path, right? So you walk past somebody from the Salvation Army and they want $5. But did you ever think to ask the Salvation Army how much of that $5 goes to the cause I care about and how much goes to administration? No, but these days it's so easy to do that because you can go online, place like GuideStar, find out that, oh yeah, 80% goes onto the ground. Great, you can give your money. You'd be stunned to find out that some of the biggest wildlife organizations give less than 0.1% to the cause that you care about. So I would just ask people that if they're donating to find out how much goes to the cause, and it's a phone call or it's an online publication. So you can do that. And that's, I think, where we falter. We can just go that extra mile and then it will help. It'll help the wildlife. And we're quarantined literally because of the poaching industry. Right. So talk about a timely movie. You can see in my film how a pangolin ends up in a wet market in Vietnam. And so you can understand why you're sitting at home in quarantine right now. So it connects the dots for you in a contextual way.
Well, again, I don't have any science to support my supposition here, but we live in a closed biosphere where we don't even understand the relationships. I mean, we've evolved along all of these other creatures. It's not like these creatures went extinct. They evolved on this planet along with us. So in my mind, there's a reason for that. I mean, our closed ecosystem, whether you're talking about where it begins in the oceans and the air and all around us, the animals that coexist with us are here to support a biological closed system. And they're just as important to our survival. We might not be able to quantify yet what all of that is because the math involved, I mean, maybe when we have deep learning AI, they'll figure out like, oh, the same way they can figure out how weather patterns can affect the whole planet. But I think these animals are here for a reason. And when they are eliminated before their time, it is a disruption of that system that has evolved over billions of years. And I think, once again, we are short-sighted in the way we think about things. So
they're crucial to the ecology of our planet. I think that people don't understand that we shouldn't really be interacting with the wildlife that we are that brings these viruses. The reason that we are is because we're plowing down all the rainforests and we're interacting with, we wouldn't have SARS or MERS or COVID if we could stay away from those ecological places and let the environment do what it's supposed to do. Like you say, it's all part of our biosphere. It's our ecology. I just wish people would think a little bit further, with us plowing down all the Amazon and humans just taking over every square inch of the planet. Where's the wildlife supposed to go? They are migratory. Like there's an inbuilt compass to them. They have to go where that migration pulls them. But if that is through a city, they're going to be killed, right? They're going to be slaughtered. I mean, obviously, I know your show's about film, so I don't want to get on my soapbox.
No,
easy for me to do.
You absolutely can, because my show is literally it's Robservations, a show about something. So it's not it literally. I mean, I can cover any topic, and I don't necessarily get overtly political on my show, but it's obvious to me. I mean, especially as a fan of science fiction, when science fiction is a genre that also can tell you the story of a civilization that rises and falls over millions of years or thousands of years or whatever. But the idea, I think what science fiction does is make you think more than anything else. It makes you think in terms of, I mean, human life is so finite, and we define everything we do by the 80 years, more or less, that we have on this planet. And so we can't think beyond our own existence in terms of, well, we need to start thinking about 200 or 300 or 400 years down the line. And I hate this attitude like, well, I'm not going to be here, so why does it matter? Well, I would hope that somebody is going to be here, and that part of the work that we're doing, I mean, we're telling stories, whether they're documentaries or whether they're reality shows or whether it's a fictional a movie, a story. Those stories are supposed to illuminate truth, human truth, and I like humanity. And I'd like to see us stick around, and I think we are short-sighted in this idea that we are eliminating. We're not even doing it for. They don't even eat these animals. You see, it's so heartbreaking in your show that somebody will go and destroy a beautiful rhinoceros just for its horn, and then leave the carcass for the animals. I mean, it's so maddening to watch, and I think, I don't think anyone who's ecologically aware, you don't have to be ashamed or to say that we need to save these animals. Well, what about all the people that need to be saved? Well, they're interlinked. By saving one, you're saving the other, and I think that's something that people tend to forget. And you really bring it home. But what I really liked about your movie, in addition to the overall message, is it is your female focus. I mean, I loved hearing you talk about that. These women, that traditionally do not have a light shined on them, and they've been sort of unsung heroes. They're brought to the forefront, and I thought that was a marvelous thing that you did. So it's not just a problem, but it's also these women are heroes, and you wouldn't have heard about it had you not have made the movie.
No, that we think about the influence when you come back on Instagram, but these women to me are the true influencers. That's, if I had children, that is what I would want them to be looking at and emulating. The courage to stand up for their convictions. We don't live in a time where if you really are passionate about something that you can afford to sit back and do nothing about it. I don't care what your cause is. Now is the time to stand up and say, what do you stand for? I have this little motto, which is I'd rather die for something than live for nothing.
Right.
And when I get into a corner, it's like, okay, is this my credo? Like, I'm going to fight for this, and I'm going to stand up and say my piece. Fortunately, we live in a world where we can say what we want to say, and we won't be jailed for it or tortured for it. And a lot of the women don't have that luxury, but they do it anyway. They do it in a lot more sensitive. They don't come at it as harsh as we can, right? But they still are risking their families, their livelihoods every day by trying to bring into their countries the science-based fact that keratin will not save your grandfather from cancer,
right?
And rhino horn doesn't give you a hard-on because it's matched with a drug that does give you a hard-on. So just forget the rhino horn and take the drug.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now after this wonderful movie that has won so many awards, you now are working on a new film. Can you talk about that at all?
I can talk a little bit about it. Right now it's called Open Secret. I may change it, but I left LA. I decided to buy a house out in LA. I wanted to get back into the countryside, and I'm now in North Carolina. And within 3 days of being here, I rented a place. And within 3 days of being here, my landlady, who I was renting from, awesome woman, Maggie, came to me and told me this story. And I was spellbound. And I said, that can't possibly be happening in this day and age. And she says, oh, it is. And she goes, don't you think that would make an incredible documentary? And I said, it'd be amazing. And she goes, you should do it. And I've been there 3 days. I just left LA. I said, I'm here for a break. I said, but listen, documentaries are not as cheap as people think they are. You'd need a budget. And she's like, I'll finance it. So that's the quickest I've ever had a film financed. It was like, it was pitched to me and it was financed like 2 weeks later. It's not fair. It was financed in 2 weeks, but I took a long time about signing on to it because I thought, am I the right person to tell this story? It's a story of extreme racism, extreme sexual abuse, and it's about the old patriarchy. It's corruption, collusion, blackmail. I mean, there's nothing. It's a Martin Scorsese film in documentary form. I don't want to give too much away because I don't want people to know about it with a bigger budget to come in and then take it out from under me. But the two guys who are my protagonists, they were the change makers, and they are the reason that this whole thing blew up. Heads have been rolling, people are in jail, people have been killed, and it's this black guy and this white guy, an incredibly charismatic novelist in the South, and a remarkable black activist preacher. Can't you see that feature film right there?
I'm already riveted. I mean, now where are you in the production process?
Okay, so we had to shut down because of the virus. But what I am doing is I brought my editor in 2 months earlier than he ordinarily would have. So he's editing the footage that I'd already shot. Unfortunately, I had a lot shot, but I had some pivotal key interviews that I had to postpone. I'm now sort of weighing up, shall I Skype them? I really love being there with them. You know, I feel you get much more out of somebody, but I may have to resort to that. So right now, my editor's putting a rough cut together for me, which I'll have in about 2 weeks.
That's amazing.
So I'm pretty far. Yeah, I'm pretty far into the process, thankfully.
Well, I mean, what an incredible story. This has been so much fun talking to you, because I think your story it shows that there's no clear path. Everyone's like, so how did you get to where you're going? And I feel the same way about my own career. I mean, it's ping-ponged around and well, let me ask you this. I mean, since there's been so much made about, you know, we're living in the post-Me Too movement now, but you seem to have, what can you say to budding women filmmakers and your experience? What has your experience taught you? Has being a woman in the industry been a help? Has it been a hindrance? Have you found it wasn't an issue? But now, you know, obviously you've directly attacked women's issues in your work on now 2 different occasions. Now I guess maybe a 3rd occasion. I don't know. It's a secret. Don't tell me. Don't make it open yet. But what can you say to other, say, women filmmakers that are thinking about maybe getting into a career but they're intimidated? What would you say to them?
That's a really good question. It's a big question, because I try not to bring gender into it, because I came up when gender was an issue, and I don't believe that gender is an issue anymore. Okay, so
you don't. That's interesting.
Decades. Well, I would say that only when I started out in film, you had to work at a studio because it was too expensive to do it on your own, because the equipment didn't exist back then. Now that the equipment does exist, it shouldn't be an issue, because no one's stopping you from buying a camera, filming your subject, your project, editing it yourself, and bringing in the people. There's no one to stand in your way. There was 20 years ago. So when I say gender's not an issue, I think about the story. I like to hire a crew that is multicultural, you know, gender fluid, I want every kind of person working with me, because it makes the story better. Yep. You're getting different perspectives. You're having great conversations at the end of the day. Hey, what resonated for you? That's unusual. That would never have resonated for me. That makes my brain spark in other creative ways, which just makes the project better, right? As the track I'm on right now as a documentarian, I feel like I would say to women, be accountable in only one respect, which is make sure that you hire women for your films. Don't go to the default of, well, this guy's had more experience and he's been doing it forever. You know, like, give a woman a break, but don't do it if she's not as good as the man that you were going to hire, because that in itself is also, that's sexism, right? You're hiring someone based on their sex. You should always hire based on their experience and your connection to them. Sometimes, like my DP on Open Secret, the moment that I met him, I just felt like he's my brother. I didn't know him from Adam, and we've such an incredible working relationship, and we only met on this project. He happens to be African-American. He happens to be somebody who came to film a little later in his career. None of that matters. He's so talented, and we connect. So that's what I look for. The only thing is, like, I want to make sure I also have women on my set. So then I make sure that I get a lot of resumes, and I look at a lot of resumes, and I will try to hire a woman, but not at the expense of the experience of the person that I'm trying to hire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that absolutely. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's the work that matters. You might, you can hire whoever you want, but that doesn't help you get what you need to get in the can to make your film great.
What about you? When you hire, what do you look for?
Same thing. I mean, I like to work with the best people I can work with. And it's always been like, when I was making Free Enterprise, I edited a film that the director of photography had shot, and he hadn't had a lot of work shooting a feature film. And because I'd edited this film that he had shot, I thought he did a wonderful job. And I didn't look any further than him, because I knew, working with him as the editor, I'm like, I love this guy. And he was probably older. I could have found somebody, but I really had liked his work because I'd seen it. You know, and not only that, I'd been through it all with a fine-tooth comb. And I'm like, this guy and I can connect. And I feel that it's really important. You have to be able to film as a collaborative medium, whether it's documentaries, whether it's reality programming, or whether it's feature films. You have to have people that you're simpatico with, that you also believe in their abilities and talents, because otherwise it leads to problems. And as you know, I mean, it's a collective effort. Film is a collective effort. And while I think you do need a strong figurehead at the top, you do need somebody with a vision that can sort of steer the ship, because everyone looks to that person. And as you know, film crews, you have a half a day to win your film crew. You have until lunch of the first day. As a director, it's like your crew needs to know that you know what you want, so they can give you, because a film crew wants to give you what you want. And but I think it's really important who you work with. And I agree. As much as I like diversity, and again, I'm always saying on the end of this show, though, I always sign off with, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And I believe that. But that doesn't always mean that just because they have a story to tell, they're the best person for the job.
No, I love that. I love that. Well, and it's one of the other things that I always try to do, can't always do it, is I love working with young people who are like fresh out of film school, or because they don't know enough to say, oh, you can't do that. You work with someone who's my peer, they're like, oh, we tried that didn't work, you can't do that. They don't know the word can't, they know the word let's try. And I live in that world. Let's try it. So I get energy off of them, and they get experience and steering from me. So it's definitely a quid pro quo in that respect. Yeah, I try to bring on a lot of younger people on the crew, because I just think it's really good for the project ultimately.
Well, when you finish this new film, where would you like to see yourself go in the next decade or two?
I have found my niche. I love producing and directing documentaries. I never knew this was coming. I had been working on Breaking Their Silence. That's the only one I really wanted to make. That was my passion project. I didn't see Bill Core's coming. That literally fell in my lap. I don't know where the road, is going to take me. I that's what I love about my life. I think that you're always given opportunities, and it's up to you whether or not you follow them through to the end point. You can say no, and a different road opens to you. But I always have had this thing, is the minute that I lock onto something, like I just focus on it, and then I walk towards that, and the road always rises to meet me. So I have confidence in that, and I don't know what it'll be. Maybe this will be my last film. I don't know that either. I hope not.
Well, listen, I mean, this is by the way, one more thing I want to mention. You did a TED Talk. You did a TED Talk. And
TEDx. I did a TEDx.
Okay, TEDx, but still, and I know you were via social media on Facebook, you had a little bit of trepidation before you did this. You even said to me you were a little nervous. What was it like doing a TEDx talk, and how was that for you?
Okay, this is going to show you how I work, right? This is the machinations of my brain. My friend Richard Averett, we're in this group together. It's called Common, which I am so proud of that I belong to that group. It's a global group, common.is if you're interested. And Richard reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a TED Talk on the making of Breaking Their Silence? And my first thought was, no, I'm the person who will run through the door marked death, because public speaking was the other door. It was a no-brainer, but he's such a nice guy. And I was slammed when he asked me, and I just wrote back, yeah, sounds great. I thought, make a note to cancel that months ahead so they can find somebody. Just a mental note. I was so slammed doing two projects. You know how projects overlap, right? You get that time where you're still furiously in post on one, and then you're in prep on another, and you've got so much going on. And I got an email that was them promoting me on this TEDx talk. And I'm like, oh, I have to do a TEDx. I have to do it. I'm not prepared. And I lost like, I don't know, 24 pounds just from worry. I just stopped eating. And I have to tell you, it was TEDx Charlottesville, and the people at TEDx Charlottesville know how to take care of their speakers. They partnered me with an amazing woman named Mercedes. She's an actress on Broadway, and so she worked with me. And she was so good for me, because every time she would sort of bring up the TEDx, I'm like, no, stop, don't even say that. Let me just work on this, because you're not allowed to memorize it, right? But you have to make it your story. So I don't even think there's words for the fear. Nothing in my world up to that point had scared me as much as that talk did, the idea of it. And then when I was on stage, you do like a run through the day before, but the day that I was actually going to speak, they were announcing me, and the audio guy, bless his heart, hadn't even put my mic on yet on me. And they were announcing me, and I'm saying, so I'm running out, like trying to get myself, and in retrospect, I think that's what got me on stage. There's a really good chance I would have just been petrified and just not gone on stage. Really good chance. And so again, fate, right? Like that sort of set of circumstances made me run on stage, and then suddenly I was there. I just remember thinking I was going to get it wrong, but how could I get my story wrong? Right? It doesn't make any sense. And it's one thing for me to tell you, hey, Rob, you're my friend. I'd love to share this experience with you. But there's 1,000 people in that audience. It was live streaming and they're filming it. So there's all these things coming at you. And then you're telling probably your most personal story of why you've made this film to these people. But they were so warm and so responsive. And I was able to bring in 3 clips from my film, I totally fell back on that. But I would never do it again.
Well, I'm glad I got to hear that story from you. Well, listen, I don't want to keep you all day, but this is, by the way, what a fantastic interview you are.
Really?
Yes, very much so. And you know, a lot of what I've focused on is filmmaking, and people want to know stories. I mean, your journey is a fantastic one, and you're obviously a delightful interview. So. And it's great. You
know why? It's because I was telling my friend about doing this, and she's like, "Are you excited?" I said, "I love him to bits, but he's such an encyclopedia of film. I know he's just going to shut me down with his brilliance. I'm going to be like, I don't know the answer to that question, Rob."
No, I mean, I'm here to hear from you. I'm not here to convince you what I know. And you've been terrific. This has been so good.
You have too. Thank you.